No one escaped Solara Prime, an orbiting prison built to crush hope and erase names. But when a brilliant human engineer crosses paths with a mysterious woman hiding powers the system tried to erase, everything changes. Together they'll outsmart guards, bend the rules of physics, and ignite a rebellion in the heart of a fortress meant to be unbreakable. This isn't just a jailbreak. It's the spark that could burn an empire to the ground. If you are new here, then please, subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move toward this wonderful story. The prison ship rumbled as it descended toward Solara Prime, its hull trembling from atmospheric resistance. Inside, Riven Doss sat chained to the transport bench, his wrists caught in cold magnetic cuffs that pulsed faintly with warning lights. He didn't flinch as the ship landed with a deep thud, but the jolt knocked a few of the other prisoners off balance. Around him, a strange collection of alien forms hissed, growled, or remained. Eerily still, Riven remained quiet, his eyes scanning everything, the bolts on the door, the rhythmic beeping of the wall sensors, the number of guards at each end. He was an engineer at heart, and engineers didn't panic. They calculated. A voice barked from the front of the ship. "Welcome to Solara Prime. Last stop for all your regrets." The guard who spoke was tall, armored in exoskeletal gear, and wore a metal mask that distorted his voice into a mechanical growl. Riven didn't respond. He'd learned that silence kept you alive in places like this. The ship's ramp lowered, with a hiss of steam, revealing a landscape that looked like something torn from a dream twisted into a nightmare. The sky above Solara Prime was a burnt orange hue, streaked with lightning that never reached the ground. The prison complex itself stretched across the planet like a massive mechanical scar. Its towers were jagged, its lights flickering red like warning signals. The air tasted metallic, and even gravity seemed heavier than usual, pressing down like an invisible punishment. As the guards pushed the prisoners down the ramp, Riven focused on keeping his balance. His muscles ached from the long trip, and the gravity shift didn't help. He kept his head down but made mental notes of every sensor, drone, and turret he passed. No one escaped Solara Prime, they said. But Riven didn't believe in never. Everything had a system, and every system had a flaw. They were herded into a large intake chamber, where scanning drones flew past, tagging each prisoner with ID chips. Riven Doss, human, crime, unauthorized enhancement of protected technology, sentence 7 cycles. A synthetic voice read from the scanner as it passed him. He grimaced. He hadn't stolen anything. He'd simply improved a power storage unit by 45%. That was his real crime, being smarter than the people in charge. The corporations didn't like innovation unless it came with their name on it. Then a new voice interrupted the drone. "Human? That's rare these days." Riven turned his head slightly, enough to see who had spoken. A tall, narrow figure stepped forward from a dark hallway. His skin was pale gray, his eyes black and empty like ink dropped into water. His uniform bore the symbol of the warden's office. "Director of Intake Services," read the label on his coat. "I'm Varnell. Consider yourself under observation." Riven met his eyes without flinching. "Is that meant to scare me?" The alien blinked once, slowly. "Not yet." A signal sounded and the prisoners were separated into groups. Riven was directed to Block Theta, the tech sector. He was stripped of his travel uniform and given the standard prison suit. A plain, gray jumpsuit lined with faint pulsing threads. Each pulse was synced to his heartbeat. It was a living tracker. "Cute," Riven muttered. The guard behind him grunted and shoved him forward. Block Theta wasn't as chaotic as he'd expected. It was quiet. Too quiet. Prisoners sat alone, talked in hushed tones, or stared at the walls. Automated sentry bots floated above them, cameras whirring softly. Riven was placed in cell 32B. He took a moment to test the bars, not that he expected them to move. Still, he noted the make, the voltage, the spacing. Details mattered. Later that day, during orientation in the power core workshop, Riven met her. She was standing alone near a damaged generator, her hands cuffed, but her posture strangely regal. Her skin shimmered in the low light, a shade of pale blue that seemed to shift with every movement. Thin lines pulsed under her collar, an inhibitor device standard for prisoners with special abilities. The collar sparked occasionally, making her flinch, but she didn't complain. She didn't even grimace. Riven found himself watching her longer than he meant to. "What's the matter?" she said suddenly, her voice calm but tired. "You've never seen a Polari before?" He hesitated. "I've never seen a Polari with a faulty inhibitor." Her brow rose. "You're observant. I'm an engineer. I'm Kalen." Before he could answer, the collar sparked again, harder this time, and she stumbled. Instinct kicked in. Riven stepped forward, catching. Her skin was cold, but her grip was strong. Their eyes met. Hers were a shade of silver, and in that moment they didn't look afraid. They looked determined. A guard noticed and shouted, rushing toward them. Riven let go immediately, stepping back with his hands raised. "Just helping," he said calmly. The guard grunted. "Keep your help to yourself, human." But Kalen looked at him as the guards pulled her away. There was no thanks, no fear, just a flash of something that looked like recognition. He didn't know why, but it made something inside him shift. That night, lying on the narrow bunk in his cell, Riven couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the malfunction in her collar. He knew that design. It wasn't meant for Polari physiology. It would burn her out from the inside eventually. But it didn't have to. No one escaped Solara Prime. But maybe someone could survive it, and maybe, just maybe, someone could help her. Riven stood at the edge of the generator bay, the faint hum of overloaded power cores buzzing in the background. His jumpsuit felt tighter than usual under the scrutiny of the guards, and the ever-watching eye of the automated drones above didn't help. Solara Prime's air always carried a dry, metallic taste. Still, he was getting used to it, or at least, pretending to. What he wasn't getting used to was Kalen. She was already at her station, her cuffs slightly loosened for the sake of work, though the control collar still pulsed weakly against her throat. Each pulse made her flinch ever so slightly, like someone being hit with invisible static. Riven noticed every detail. He'd been watching it more closely than he should have. Her movements, her breath, the small tremor in her fingers when the pulses grew stronger. She shouldn't still be walking, let alone lifting energy regulators, but she did, like she had something to prove. They hadn't spoken since their brief exchange days earlier. Even so, he felt something shift when she glanced his way. Not a smile, not even a nod, just a long look. Measured, calm, knowing. He kept working, but his mind was already running through options. He could fix that collar. Not completely, not yet, but enough to stop the pain, enough to give her back a fraction of herself. Later that evening, during system recalibrations, he was assigned to inspect control units on the south end of the bay, right next to Kalen's post. Coincidence? Maybe. But nothing in Solara Prime ever felt like coincidence. She didn't speak until the supervisor bot drifted out of earshot. "You've been thinking about the collar," she said quietly, eyes still fixed on the broken circuit panel in front of her. He didn't deny it. "It's not calibrated for your neural pattern. They're using a generic algorithm. That's why it keeps sparking." Her hands paused mid-motion. "Can you fix it?" "I can make it hurt less," he replied, "and I can give you something. Small back. A window. A second or two of control." She nodded once. "Do it." He didn't need more permission. Over the next few hours, he worked while pretending not to, rewiring small nodes inside her collar interface while pretending to adjust a nearby power converter. His hands moved fast and sure, masking what he was doing beneath layers of routine. "What did they get you for?" she asked at one point. He smirked. "Engineering brilliance. Seriously. I improved a capacitor system for deep space travel, made it 45% more efficient. They called it unauthorized enhancement of protected design. Big Corp didn't, like that someone could outthink them." Kalen's expression didn't change much, but something softened around her eyes. "So, They locked you up for being smarter than their patents? They like control more than innovation. She nodded slowly. Same here. What do you mean? I worked in research, energy transfer, quantum links. I found something I shouldn't have, a pattern in the prisoner logs. People vanishing, names erased. I started asking questions. She looked down at her hands. Then I stopped existing. Woke up here. For the first time, Riven saw her not just as a mystery, but as someone like him. Caught in a system that feared anyone who didn't stay quiet. They weren't just prisoners, they were warnings to others. When the collar buzzed again and she winced, he leaned close. I'm done, she blinked. It's fixed? Try focusing. Carefully. I gave you a micro gap between pulses. It should let you channel something before the system catches on. Kaylin closed her eyes. Her breath slowed. Then a wrench on the ground beside them lifted slightly off the floor, hovered for half a second and dropped. Her eyes opened. I haven't done that in months. Let's keep it our secret. That night she found him during the shift change in the corridor behind the tool storage bay. It was dark and mostly empty. Only a few flickering lights buzzed above. You risked a lot, she said. I don't like wasted potential. You're strange, human. I get that a lot. She smiled then. A real one. It didn't last long, but it was there. They talked. About systems, about security, loops, about the 2.8-second delay in the power relay that happened every day at the same time. Most people ignored it. Riven saw it as an opportunity. Kaylin saw it as a door. And together they started building the plan. They couldn't trust anyone else. Not yet. The guards didn't care. The other inmates were either broken or dangerous. But the two of them, an engineer and a former researcher, they had something others didn't. Knowledge and the will to use it. By the end of the night, Kaylin's collar had been adjusted to allow for slightly longer bursts. She could move, small objects. She could feel energy again. She could almost breathe. Why are you really helping me? She asked once, not looking at him. Riven thought for a moment. Because systems aren't perfect. They pretend they are, but they're full of weak spots and bad code. People like us? We see the cracks. She tilted her head. You think I'm a crack in the system? No, he said. You're the current running through it. Kaylin said nothing, but her fingers brushed his as they passed in the hallway. It wasn't affection exactly, it was trust in its earliest, rarest form. They walked away from each other that night with the beginnings of a shared mission. Not an escape yet, but a question. What if Solara Prime wasn't unbreakable? What if they were the ones to prove it? The lights in the corridor flickered again. A power fluctuation, small but noticeable, passed through Solara Prime like a warning pulse. Riven and Kaylin exchanged a glance across the workshop bay, pretending not to know each other as they continued their assigned tasks. But both knew what it meant. Another test. Another step closer. Every night for the past week, they'd been working in shadows, stitching together a plan out of stolen moments and spare parts. Riven had mapped out the electrical grid of the facility, noting weak spots, unused panels, and overlooked vent systems. Kaylin, with her returned fragments of power, had tested her range in secret, using moments between pulses to shift tools, trip sensors, and manipulate lights without drawing attention. Slowly, piece by piece, they were building something bigger than escape. They were building a crack in the fortress no one had ever escaped. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And it was working, until someone started watching them. It began with a question. Riven was replacing a fuse core behind one of the secondary generators when a voice rumbled from the shadows. Why is it that you and the energy witch keep getting the best work orders? He turned slowly. The speaker was tall and broad, with stone-gray skin and eyes that blinked sideways. His name was Brax, and he had a reputation for knowing everything that happened in the prison before the guards did. A trader of information and threats, he was not someone to ignore. I don't choose the orders, Riven said, keeping his tone light. Brax stepped closer. You're hiding something, I can smell it. Riven forced a laugh. Maybe it's just the fumes from the coolant pipe. But Brax didn't laugh. He leaned in. Here's what I think. I think you're planning something with her. Something big. I think if the right person found out, they'd be very interested. Might even earn a few favors. Or maybe, if I kept my mouth shut, I'd expect something in return. That night, Riven told Kaelin everything. She listened without expression, but her eyes darkened. He knows enough to be dangerous, Riven said, but not enough to stop us. He will eventually, she replied. We need to either shut him down or bring him in. Riven frowned. You trust him? No, she said. But he wants something. That makes him predictable. For now. Against Riven's better judgment, they approached Brax with an offer. He would get a seat on their escape, only during the final phase, and only if he kept silent. He agreed too easily with a crooked smile that Riven didn't like at all. The next day things moved quickly. Kaelin faked a system overload in Sector 9, causing a blackout that gave Riven access to the central grid hub. He used the chaos to install a bypass chip into the control system, something that would buy them a critical delay in the automated lock sequence when the time came. But things were changing. The guards were doubling shifts. More drones buzzed the air. Warden Corrin hadn't shown himself in days, and that alone was reason to worry. He wasn't the kind to stay hidden unless he smelled something was wrong. During the final planning phase, Kaelin and Riven met in the supply shaft, a cramped, forgotten space behind the kitchen ventilation system. Kaelin brought the final tool, a modulator she had built from a medical scanner and parts stolen from the infirmary. Riven smiled when he saw it. That's it, he said. With this, we can shut the security field in the docking bay for just long enough. Kaelin looked tired. Her collar had been glitching more often, and each time it did, it took a little more out of her. We can do this, Riven said, touching her hand. We're close. She nodded, but her voice was quiet. There's something I haven't told you. He waited. I wasn't just a researcher before, she said. I worked for the warden directly. My job was to oversee energy use protocols for prisoner processing. Riven blinked. You were part of it? I didn't know the full scope, not at first. When I found out, I tried to report it. That's when I became a prisoner. She met his eyes. I understand if you don't trust me anymore. He studied her. If I didn't trust you, I wouldn't be building a prison break device with you. She almost smiled. Fair point. Just then, a voice crackled through the shaft vent above them. You two have been busy. Brax. Riven tensed as the large figure dropped into the shaft, landing with a heavy thud. You told him where we were? Riven asked Kaelin sharply. I didn't, she said, eyes locked on Brax. I followed you, Brax replied. Nice little plan you've got here. What do you want? Kaelin asked. I want more than just a ride out. I want half of whatever data you've stolen. I know you've got something on the warden. Riven clenched his fists. We're not doing this for profit. Then you're bigger fools than I thought, Brax said. But it doesn't matter. You give me what I want or I go straight to the tower and hand over every detail. Silence stretched between them. Then Kaelin spoke, her voice cold. Storage Bay 4. Tomorrow. Final prep. Brax nodded and crawled back into the vent. As soon as he was gone, Riven turned to her. You're not seriously going to let him come? No, she said. I'm not. Her voice was like stone. That night, Riven slept with one thought circling his mind. Their plan was still alive, but someone was going to die before it ended. Morning came with the sound of alarms echoing through Solera Prime's cold metal walls. A red light pulsed in time with the sirens, casting everything in an eerie glow. Inside her isolation cell, Kaelin stood barefoot on the steel floor, her eyes closed, her body still. The collar that had once drained her strength now lay in pieces, at her feet, shattered by her own ability the night before. She had waited years for this moment, the exact second when the system underestimated her one last time. Now she was done waiting. With a wave of her hand, the steel cell door groaned and bent outward, snapping free from its frame like wet paper. Guards down the corridor shouted in alarm, rushing toward her with stun weapons drawn. She didn't run. She simply raised her hand again. The ground vibrated and the air shimmered as the corridor filled with a shockwave of force, sending the guards tumbling backward, weapons skidding across the floor. One tried to stand. She flicked her fingers, and the ceiling panel above him collapsed, knocking him out cold. Kalen stepped over them, calm and steady, heading for the rendezvous point. In Block Theta, Riven heard the alarms and knew instantly. Kalen was free. He finished attaching the final wire to the bypass device hidden in the main circuit panel. As the system pulsed through its morning diagnostic cycle, the device activated. A thin hum passed through the floor. For exactly 2.8 seconds, the facility's security fields dropped just a fraction, enough to open the doors they needed. He grabbed the stolen access card and darted into the maintenance corridor, his heart pounding not from fear but from timing. They met at the old loading dock where broken equipment was stored, Storage Bay 4. Riven arrived first, tools strapped, to his belt, the bypass controller in his hand. Kalen entered seconds later, the light around her eyes glowing with energy. She was a force now, not just a person. But when she looked at him, she still smiled, like the woman who used to flinch every time her collar sparked. "We're in position," she said. Riven nodded. "Security's on a loop, we've got 6 minutes." Just as they turned to leave, a heavy figure blocked the exit. Brax. His eyes gleamed with triumph, and in his hand was a comm device. "I told you," he said with a grin. "You should have cut me in properly. Now the warden will know everything." Kalen stepped forward. "Move." He held up the comm. "Not until I—" A burst of energy surged from Kalen, shattering the comm in Brax's hand. The force sent him flying backward into a crate, where he slumped, dazed but breathing. Riven gave her a look. "You said you wouldn't kill him." "I didn't," she said. "But I don't have to be gentle." They moved fast, weaving through half-lit corridors and abandoned service tunnels until they reached the communications tower. The guards were already moving, alerted by the alarm Brax had triggered. But Kalen was ready. Her energy swirled around them, bending light and sound, shorting out surveillance drones as they passed. At the base of the tower, 3 guards blocked the stairwell. Riven ducked for cover, but Kalen stepped into view. "You don't want to be here," she said, her voice quiet but filled with power. One of the guards lowered his weapon. The other 2 looked uncertain. Then with a sudden wave of force, she pushed them all back gently but firmly, sending them sliding across the polished floor without harm. Riven stared. "You've gotten stronger." "I've remembered who I am." Inside the tower, Riven reached the terminal. He inserted the chip they had built together, containing data stolen from the warden's personal system, proof of secret experiments, forced disappearances, and prisoner abuse. Kalen stood watch, her fingers twitching. "With focus, I need 2 minutes," Riven said. "You have one." Footsteps echoed from below. More guards. Too many. Kalen's eyes burned bright as she stepped to the staircase, her arms rising. The air itself seemed to resist the guards' approach. Weapons froze mid-fire, sound twisted into silence, and the very metal around the stairwell groaned under invisible pressure. "Done," Riven shouted. "It's broadcasting." Kalen turned, her breath quick and shallow. "Then we go. Now." They ran for the shuttle dock. The evidence was sent. The truth was free. Now they had to be. Warden Corrin stood in the control room watching. It unfold rage in his eyes. The transmission had reached the galactic Concord. Within hours, ships would come. His empire was burning, and he didn't even know how they got past his systems. Kalen and Riven burst into the hangar bay. A supply. Ship sat ready to launch, its engines cycling. One final obstacle remained. 2 guards and a security override on the main ramp. Riven raced to the panel, his hands flying over the controls. "Cover me." Kaylin stepped forward, her energy swirling around her like a storm. When the guards lifted their weapons, she didn't strike. She disarmed them without touching them, pulling their weapons apart midair and dropping the pieces at their feet. The guards backed away slowly, eyes wide. "Got it," Riven yelled. The ramp dropped. They ran up, sealed the door behind them, and launched. As the shuttle broke through the planet's atmosphere, Kaylin looked through the viewport. The orange sky faded into black. Stars blinked into view, stretching into a wide-open future. She turned to Riven, her voice quiet but filled with relief. "We're free," he smiled, exhaustion and joy mixing in his eyes. "No, we're just getting started." Far below, Solara Prime spun on in silence, its secrets exposed, its orbit no longer untouched. A new chapter had begun, written not by systems but by the ones who broke them.